Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to walk you through setting up the AudioBox USB from Presonus to get started recording and mixing. We're going to be looking at the Presonus AudioBox USB today, but before we dive into our little piece of equipment here, if you are looking to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at our little piece of gear here, our little piece of equipment. This is a nice, convenient little box. This is something I use when I travel now. So if I need to take my laptop with me and do a little bit of mixing on the road, this is what I take with me. It's also what I use to run my live keyboard rig now. So I take it with me. It's nice and portable. I can plug my keyboard rig into it, and it can go right in my laptop that sits next to my live rig. So it's very nice for portable like that, and it's also very convenient if you have a smaller home studio. You don't need that many inputs. Maybe you're just doing some mixing. It's a nice little interface that can get you through all of that stuff. This is actually the interface that I started on a long time ago when I first got into engineering. So recording, mixing, and mastering. This is the piece of gear that I started on. It came with Studio One Artist back in the day. I think it still does if you buy this interface. And I bought it with a bundle. It came with headphones and a little mic pack as well from Guitar Center. So very cool piece of gear to get started with. Let's go over the main features on the actual box itself. So starting here on the front, we have 2 inputs on the front, and they're both hybrid inputs, which is very nice. So that means you can plug either a TRS cable, so an instrument cable, a 1/4-inch cable, or an XLR cable in here, which is a microphone cable. So you can plug either one into either one of these. So some interfaces only have that one XLR and then one 1/4-inch. The Presonus AudioBox USB has the added benefit of having both hybrid inputs, which is very helpful and very convenient. Moving on over here, we do have the input gain knob or the gain knob for each one of our inputs here. So you have top one here is the input gain for input number 1, and the bottom one here is the input gain for input number 2. So we have a separate gain knob for each of them. Very helpful there. And they are numbered as well, so you can see input 1, input 2, input 1, and input 2. And then there is also a clip light next to each input gain knob, so you can see if you go too far, you'll see when you start clipping, or you'll see if you start getting near that red light there. Right above here in between our gain knobs and our actual inputs is a 48 volts button, which is awesome to have if you're going to be doing a lot of vocal recording. Maybe that's what you do. You just doing vocal recording, and you just need a little interface like this to plug your microphone into. If you have a condenser microphone that needs phantom power, we have our 48 volts button or phantom power button right here to send phantom power to these 2 inputs here. So you can plug your condenser microphone in the front here, click your 48 volts button, and you'll get the phantom power necessary to power your condenser microphone. It doesn't have the added benefit of switching it on for each input, which can be convenient if you have a couple things plugged in at a time. Maybe you don't need phantom power on one of them, but it's nice to have it on there if you are doing vocal recording with condenser microphones, so you can power those condenser microphones with our little interface here. Moving on over to our next knob here, so our knob dead center here is our mixer knob. So this is something that's very helpful on a smaller interface like this. Some of the smaller interfaces don't have this option, they just have a direct monitor button. This mixer knob here allows you to mix between hearing your inputs or hearing your playback. So if we have it all the way over to inputs, you will only hear the signal coming in the front of your interface on your 2 inputs here. And then if we go the opposite way, if we go all the way over to playback, you will only hear the signal coming out from your computer or from your DAW. So you'll only hear your playback. But the cool thing here is that we can actually use the knob to mix between them. So if we put it right in the middle here, we can hear both the signal coming in from our inputs and the signal coming out from our computer or from our DAW. And you can go between any level you want. So if you want more of your inputs, you can go that way. If you want to lean more towards playback, you can go that way. So it's a nice option to have if you're recording and you're like, oh, I need to hear more of myself. You can go more towards inputs, or if you're like, oh, I need to hear more of the track, you can go more towards playback. So that's a helpful option and a convenient option to have on a smaller interface like this. It doesn't give you the flexibility of having different faders for each different channel, right? If you want to hear more of that channel besides turning up the input gain, but having this little mixer knob is something helpful on a smaller 2-channel interface like this. Last 2 knobs here on the front, we have our volume knob for our headphones, which we'll talk about a headphone on the back. So you can turn up the volume for your headphones here, and then we have our main volume here, which turns up the volume for your main outputs on the back, which we will talk about here in a second as well. That covers everything here on the front, and you also have a power LED too, so you know when you plug it in that it's turned on because you'll see the power LED turn on. Flipping over to the back side here, we have a couple different slots here, or inputs and outputs on the back here. First one here is our headphones output. So you can plug your headphones in here to hear whatever you want in your headphones coming from your audio interface, whether it be YouTube coming from your computer or the signal coming out from your DAW. You can hear that here. And remember, on the front, we have our own little knob to do the volume on our headphones. So it's separate from our next 2 slots here, which are our main outputs. So you have a stereo output here, a left and a right, to go out to your studio monitors or any kind of speakers you have in your studio there. And again, we have a separate volume control that we talked about on the front for those main outputs. That's something that I really love about this interface, the Presonus, the AudioBox like this, is that you have separate control for your headphones and separate volume control for your main outputs for your speakers. That's something that gives you a little bit more flexibility. Some of the smaller interfaces, some of the Focusrites just have the one big knob, which is your volume for both your main outs as well as your headphones. Sometimes that can constrain you a little bit working on a smaller interface like this, but the AudioBox USB doesn't have that constraint. It allows you the flexibility of having a separate volume control for your speakers, for your main outs, and your headphones. So that's awesome to have there. Moving on over, we have 2 MIDI options here. We have the MIDI input and we have the MIDI output. So even on a smaller interface like this, you can plug in your MIDI instruments here, whether you have MIDI keyboards or other MIDI instruments, MIDI pads or drum pads like that. You can plug them in here and load them right into your DAW and use them. So that's very, very cool to have that option on a smaller interface like this. It gives it more usability, it gives it more flexibility. So you have 2 inputs on the front. So maybe you plug a guitar and a vocal here in on the front, and then you plug a drum machine here and a keyboard here, and it gets you a full band going there, which is awesome to have that kind of flexibility and that kind of expansiveness with just a small 2-channel interface like this. And then, of course, all the way over here on this side, we have our USB plug, and you can see it's plugged into our computer. So you'll plug one end of your USB cable into the interface, and the other end will go into a USB slot on your computer, and you will see the power light turn on your interface here. So let's jump into the DAW now and talk about the features or getting set up inside your DAW. I'm going to set this guy back over here. So once you're inside your DAW, you load up Studio One or whatever DAW you're using. You'll want to make sure you're using the AudioBox USB. So here inside of Studio One, we will click the setup here, and we'll want to make sure we're under audio setup and audio device. And then playback device, you can choose this little drop down and pick the AudioBox USB. Make sure you're using that as your playback device, and it should pull it up as your recording device too. You can separate those if need be. Device block size and sample rate, you don't need to worry about. Those should come up and be caught when you plug your interface in. It should choose the best options for you, but if you do need to lower your device block size or raise it, those options are there for you. The sample rate should default to whatever interface you're using there. That's how we set it up inside of Studio One or inside of whatever DAW you're using. Just make sure your playback device and your recording device are set to the AudioBox USB. Let's jump into an actual session here. So we'll come up and open up a new song. We'll make it an empty song. We'll call it AudioBox. If I can spell AudioBox correctly. Don't need to change any of these options here. We'll click OK, and it can load up our new session here. So we have an empty session. we're going to create a couple tracks and talk about the two inputs here on the front. So if you don't know the shortcut for creating a track inside of Studio One, it is T. Otherwise, you can press this plus sign here to add tracks. So I'm going to press T, and I'm going to add 2 tracks, and we'll just call them input. And it'll change it to input 1, input 2, and then we'll have to change the interface we're using as well inside of our audio I/O setup. So I usually record off my 32 channel mixer here, but we're going to change it to the AudioBox here. So you can see it's switched to our AudioBox, and if you have a bunch of channels, you'll see all those different channels there. But if you just have your AudioBox channels, you'll have front left, which will be input 1, and front right, which will be input 2, and you can name those whatever you want. So if I name it, input 1, and then I can name it input 2, again if I can spell, or you can name them input left and input right, which is what I like to do. In case you record, stereo keyboard into the front of it, you'll know which one's left and which one's right. And then again, we have front left is coming in on 1, and front right is coming in on 2. And then outputs, you want to make sure your main outputs are here as well, so it can send out whichever way you need it to. So front left and right will go there, and then we can flip back and make sure everything's good here. You can click apply and click OK. So apply, that'll apply it there, and then OK. And then with our 2 tracks here, we'll zoom in a little bit so we can see both of them. So we have our input 1, and you can see we have our front left and our front right here. So we'll make one our front left, and we'll make the other one. All you do is click this drop down here, and we'll change it to front right. So now we have an input for our front left, which is our input 1, and then input 2, which is our front right, which is our input 2 on the front of our interface. And we can adjust our gain there for each of them. The other thing we want to make sure here is on the output here. So let's get rid of all this other stuff here that we don't need to see. So over here on our outputs, so on our main outs here, we want to make sure our main outs are front left and front right. And again, we set that inside of our audio I/O, so we'll get the signal coming out of the AudioBox on the headphone out, as well as our main stereo out, our left and right, going to our studio monitors there. So that's how we set that up there. For recording purposes, all you have to do is record and enable your track. You can monitor to hear the input if you'd like. I like to hear it right off of the interface using our mixer knob right, so I'll hear the input coming in right directly off of the AudioBox here, and I don't want to hear any latency or anything by hearing the input coming out on the playback as well. I just want to hear the raw input coming into the interface there. Then all we would do is come over here to our actual AudioBox unit, come to our gain here, and then turn our gain knob up for input 1. We can plug our microphone in, we can plug our guitar in, and then hit record, and it will record that actual input there. Same kind of thing goes for input number 2. So we can disable record for input 1, record and enable input number 2. We don't need to turn on the monitor, and you can turn that off if that automatically turns on. Sometimes when you first get Studio One, if you load it up, when you turn on record, it'll automatically turn on monitor. You can just turn that off if you don't need that, if you don't want to hear it coming out playback as well. And then again, we would come here to our AudioBox USB, turn up the gain for input number 2, click record, and we would be recording whatever is plugged into input number 2 there. Now for mixing purposes, what I like to do is get my levels set on the actual AudioBox here. So once we have all our tracks lined up here and we're ready to start mixing, both of them are sending to our main output here, we want to set our mixing level. So for me, the easiest way to set my mixing level is to pull in some kind of professionally recorded track, whether it be a song that you listen to all of the time or one of your favorite songs like that. Drag that audio piece inside of Studio One here, and then you want to hit play on it, and you can set your different levels here. So you can pull my cord around here, you can set your headphone level, so turn your headphone level up slowly but surely until it's at a comfortable listening level for you. So have your headphones on, hit play on this professionally mixed and mastered track that you listen to all the time, whether it's your favorite song, whether it's just a song that you love the mix of, and turn your phone's level up here. until it's at a comfortable listening level for you, and then leave it there. If you want to mark it on the AudioBox with a piece of permanent or with a permanent marker or something like that, a piece of tape to know this is my level for listening to my mixes. And then do the same kind of thing with your main. So start with your main all the way down, hit play on that track that you listen to all the time. You know what it sounds like, whether it's a good mix or just one of your favorite songs. And then turn up your main until it's at a comfortable listening level coming out of your speakers. And then again, you can mark that with a permanent marker or a piece of tape to know this is the level I want my studio monitors at when I'm mixing or mastering. So those are the two ways we can use and get our AudioBox set up for recording and mixing and mastering, whether it be inside a Studio One here or inside whatever DAW you are using. I hope that was helpful for you to see how we get set up with our lovely little AudioBox USB here. It's a nice little workhorse to get you started, or even to work professionally if you're doing just mixing and mastering, where you only need 2 inputs on the front while you're recording. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you are ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you in the next video.